the strangest evidence about life on Earth, is sitting 7 miles beneath the Pacific, in a place cameras have only recently been able to reach. The Mariana Trench has produced 11 recordings, captured by real expeditions, real research vessels, and named scientists. Some solved decades-old mysteries. Others left those same scientists with no explanation at all. Number 11. The headless chicken monster. In May 2025, the exploration vessel Nautilus was surveying volcanic activity along the Mariana Arc, east of the trench itself, when its cameras caught something drifting through the water column. Pink, translucent, fluttering on webbed fins at its front and back, like a creature built by committee. Researchers on board identified it as Enypniastes, a swimming sea cucumber, nicknamed the headless chicken monster for its unfortunate resemblance to poultry pulled too early from the oven. It survives by sifting sediment for food, and when threatened, it can shed part of its own glowing skin to create a distraction cloud and swim away. Before this sighting, Enypniastes had been documented on camera in only 2 other places: the Gulf of Mexico in 2017 and the waters off East Antarctica in 2018, each time treated as a genuinely rare event. Finding it again near the Mariana Arc adds a third data point to a species researchers still know surprisingly little about, despite it having been described in scientific literature since the late 19th century. None of this makes it dangerous. It just makes it memorable. Strange enough that the brain has nowhere to file it. 10 more recordings remain, and the deeper this list goes, the harder each one becomes to explain. Number 10. The nameless jellyfish. On April 24, 2016, the NOAA ship Okeanos Explorer sent its remotely operated vehicle, Deep Discoverer, down to an area of seafloor scientists had informally named Enigma Seamount, inside the Marianas Trench Marine National Monument. At roughly 3,700 meters down, the cameras found something that looked less like an animal and more like a special effect. A hydromedusa, glowing red and gold against the black water, extended 2 distinct sets of tentacles, one short, one long. Scientists watching the live feed identified it as belonging to the genus Crossota and noted the extended tentacles likely meant it was lying in wait, an ambush predator with nothing to ambush but the dark itself. The Okeanos Explorer's 2016 expedition ran for nearly 3 months, from April through July, mapping bottomfish habitats, hydrothermal vents, mud volcanoes, and deep-sea coral communities across the Mariana Trench Marine National Monument and the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands. The Enigma Seamount jellyfish was only one find among dozens that season, but it became the clip that spread furthest, in part because so few people expected something that delicate-looking to survive at that depth at all. Nearly a decade later, this jellyfish still has no formal species name. It has a genus and thousands of hours of footage circulating online. A complete scientific identity is still missing because so few specimens from that depth have ever been recovered and studied. That gap between what has been filmed and what has actually been confirmed only widens the further down this list goes. Number 9. The deepest fish ever filmed. In May 2017, researchers from the Japan Agency for Marine Earth Science and Technology lowered a mackerel-baited camera lander into the trench and recorded something swimming at 8,178 meters, deeper than any fish had ever been filmed before. It looked like a ghost drifting through the dark, pale, gelatinous, with no scales, alongside small shrimp-like amphipods drawn in by the bait. The record broke by a slim margin. Earlier that same year, Chinese researchers had filmed a lionfish at 8,152 meters, and this new footage beat that mark by just 26 meters. It came from a lander launched by the research vessel Kairai, using mackerel bait to draw creatures in front of stationary 4K cameras built specifically to withstand hadal zone pressure. Later that year, a research team led by Mackenzie Geringer at the University of Washington gave the species its formal name, Pseudoleparis swiri, honoring Herbert Swire, a navigator on the 19th century expedition that first charted the trench itself. The pressure at that depth is equivalent to the weight of roughly 1,600 elephants, concentrated on a single point. Geringer's research points to a molecule called TMAO as the reason fish survive it at all, stabilizing proteins that would otherwise fail under that kind of crushing weight. Go much deeper than 8,200 meters, and researchers suspect the concentration of TMAO required to survive would become toxic to the fish itself. It may be the reason nothing with a spine has ever been recorded any lower. This was proof that life could push further than anyone assumed. What came next was proof that the trench had other kinds of pressure entirely. Number 8. The Lake of Molten Sulfur. At the summit of Daikoku Seamount, part of the volcanic arc that runs alongside the Mariana Trench, NOAA researchers discovered something in 2006 that had no real precedent in deep-sea exploration: an active pool of liquid sulfur sitting inside a crater like a cauldron. When an ROV lowered a thermometer into it, the reading came back at 187 degrees Celsius, nearly 370 degrees Fahrenheit, in water just above freezing everywhere else around it. Sulfur volcanoes like this one are exceptionally rare, even among hydrothermal features, since most vent systems on the seafloor release mineral-rich water rather than pools of molten elements sitting in the open. The surrounding ecosystem depends on chemosynthesis, microbes converting the vent's chemical output into energy, which then supports the crabs and tube worms living at its edges, a food web running on chemistry instead of sunlight. A 2014 survey by the research vessel Roger Revelle found the seamount had erupted since it was first documented, splitting the summit into 2 new craters. NOAA's Okeanos Explorer returned again in 2016 to study it further, mapping a feature unlike almost anything else on the seafloor: an active pocket of molten rock chemistry, bubbling in total darkness at extreme depth, surrounded by crabs, tube worms, and snails that had adapted to live around it. This entry breaks the pattern of the list. Nothing here swims, hunts, or hides. The trench itself is the strange thing this time, geologically alive in ways almost nowhere else on Earth can claim. From here, the list stops being about survival and starts becoming about scale. Number 7. The Nightmare Amphipods. In 2014, Dr. Alan Jameson of the University of Aberdeen led an expedition using deep-sea landers to survey the entire depth range of the Mariana Trench, from 5,000 meters down to 10,600. Cameras caught something researchers had rarely seen in such numbers: supergiant amphipods, shrimp-like crustaceans, roughly 10 times the size of their shallow water relatives, swarming in the highest density ever recorded for the species. The footage revealed something else entirely new. When predatory fish approached, the amphipods used their spiked tails to fend them off, a defensive behavior nobody had captured on camera before. At nearly a foot long, moving in swarms across the seafloor, they looked less like scavengers and more like something evolution had scaled up by accident. A separate study from the Japan Agency for Marine Earth Science and Technology found that Mariana Trench amphipods carry powerful enzymes that let them digest sunken wood, driftwood, and plant debris that occasionally sinks from the surface after storms or shipwrecks. Marine biologist Hideki Kobayashi, who co-authored the research, noted that some of the amphipods even bit into the wooden components of the camera equipment used to study them. An animal already famous for surviving crushing pressure was also surviving on a food source almost nobody expected to find 7 kilometers down. Jameson's team would return to the trench again and again over the following decade. Each time, The amphipods told them something new, and each discovery raised a stranger question than the one before it. If you have made it this deep into the list, the trench has already shown you record-breaking fish, glowing jellyfish, and a lake of molten rock. Subscribing costs nothing, and it means every new expedition like this one lands in front of you the moment the footage surfaces. The amphipods were only the beginning of what those same landers would find. Because the deeper Jameson's team explored, the stranger the trench's residents became, and one of them was not an animal at all. Number 6. The giant single-celled organisms. In July 2011, a team from the Scripps Institution of Oceanography partnered with National Geographic engineers to lower unmanned camera landers into the Serena Deep, a section of the Mariana Trench, reaching 10,641 meters down. What they filmed broke a depth record that had stood since discoveries in the New Hebrides Trench. Xenophyophores, single-celled organisms, large enough to be mistaken for something built of many. The previous depth record for a xenophyophore sighting stood at roughly 7,500 meters, set in the New Hebrides Trench. The Serena Deep specimens beat that mark by nearly 2 miles, a jump significant enough that it forced researchers to reconsider how deep complex-looking life could plausibly exist, despite belonging to an organism built from nothing more than a single cell. Dr. Lisa Levin, the Scripps deep-sea biologist who studied the specimens, and Dr. Doug Bartlett, the marine microbiologist who organized the expedition, confirmed these were among the largest individual cells known to exist anywhere on the planet, some exceeding 10 centimeters across. Levin's research has since shown they filter and concentrate heavy metals from the surrounding water, including lead, uranium, and mercury, absorbing toxic elements that would kill most other organisms. A single cell, roughly the size of a fist, thriving on toxic metal at a depth where sunlight has not reached in millions of years. It stretches the definition of what a single living cell is capable of. What scientists filmed next would prove that survival was only part of the trench's strangest trait. What the trench revealed said just as much about the surface as it did about the depths. Number 5. The species named after plastic. In 2020, researchers at Newcastle University, led by Dr. Alan Jameson, described a previously unknown species of amphipod recovered from nearly 7 kilometers down in the Mariana Trench. Before the species even had a name, scientists testing its tissue found something they had not expected: microplastic fibers, already present inside an animal that had never been seen by human eyes until that expedition. It was not the first time Jameson's research had found plastic this deep. In an earlier study, his team discovered that amphipods living in the Mariana Trench carried contamination levels comparable to crabs found in rivers in China, ranked among the most polluted in the world, a comparison that erased any assumption that the trench's remoteness might act as a natural shield against surface-level pollution. The team, supported by research from the WWF, made a deliberate choice. They named the species Erythrines plasticus, embedding the contamination directly into its scientific identity, so that every future reference to the species would carry the same warning. This was an animal living at one of the most remote, least accessible points on the entire planet, arriving already contaminated before science had even finished cataloging what it was. If a species barely older than its own name could already carry plastic in its body, the question of how deep human waste had actually traveled stopped being theoretical. Number 4. The plastic bag at the bottom of the world. In 2019, explorer Victor Vescovo piloted the submersible limiting factor to the bottom of Challenger Deep as part of the 5 Deeps expedition, an attempt to reach the lowest point of all 5 oceans. The expedition ran for 10 months, visiting the lowest points of the Pacific, Atlantic, Indian, Southern, and Arctic Oceans in sequence, with the Mariana Trench leg intended as its centerpiece. Vescovo's dive broke the record previously held by James Cameron's 2012 solo descent. He was searching for new species, and he found several. He was also filmed observing something else entirely, a thin plastic object resting undisturbed on the seafloor, alongside what appeared to be candy wrappers. Alongside the debris, his team also reported what CBS News described as angular metal or plastic objects, further evidence that human material had already reached one of the hardest places on the planet to search. Vescovo's own account, given shortly afterward, was more careful than most of the headlines that followed. He described the object as likely plastic, noting visible lettering that suggested packaging, but stopped short of confirming it outright, since the item was never retrieved for testing. Vescovo said afterward that seeing obvious human contamination at the deepest point on the planet had been genuinely disappointing to him. Confirmed or not, the implication barely changes. A place harder to reach than low Earth orbit, a place fewer than 30 people in history have ever visited, may already carry a piece of household trash. Out of everything filmed on this list, several scientists have pointed to this as the encounter that unsettles them most, not because it defies explanation, but because it is entirely, depressingly explainable. What Vescovo found by accident, another explorer would find 7 years earlier in a very different form. Number 3. The tracks that never faded. In March 2012, filmmaker James Cameron became the first person to solo dive to Challenger Deep, piloting a custom submersible called Deep Sea Challenger, nearly 10,908 meters down. The submersible took more than 7 years to design and build, combining research contributions across marine biology, microbiology, astrobiology, marine geology, and geophysics. The descent itself took 2 hours and 36 minutes. He described the seafloor afterward as barren and desolate, a landscape closer to the surface of the moon than anything found on Earth. A hydraulic fluid leak partway through the dive impaired visibility and damaged the sub's thrusters, cutting Cameron's time on the bottom shorter than planned, though he still recorded nearly 3 hours of footage before an early ascent. In that time, his cameras recorded almost nothing larger than an inch across. Then he noticed something that had no business surviving that long: skid marks left behind by a Japanese ROV named Kaiko during a 2009 survey of the same site. 3 years had passed. In almost any other environment on the planet, current, sediment, or biological activity would have erased marks like that within days. At the bottom of the Mariana Trench, they were still sitting there, untouched, exactly where the machine had left them. Cameron shared the finding at the American Geophysical Union's annual meeting, alongside the rest of his expedition's results. It was a small detail buried inside a much larger scientific presentation. It was also a quiet demonstration of something the trench does better than almost anywhere else on the planet. It does not forget. 2 entries remain. Neither one has ever been fully resolved. Number 2. The 10-year sound mystery. Between the autumn of 2014 and the spring of 2015, an autonomous glider deployed by NOAA recorded a strange metallic sound inside the Marianas Trench Marine National Monument, repeating at irregular intervals. It spanned frequencies from 38 Hz up to 8,000, moving from a low groaning register into something closer to a mechanical shriek. Sharon Newkirk, a researcher at Oregon State University who reviewed the recording, nicknamed it the Western Pacific Biotwang, and noted it was unlike any whale call her team had ever logged. When the sound was first detected, researchers briefly attributed it to minke whales, since its tone resembled a call nicknamed the Star Wars sound for its resemblance to a science fiction ray gun. That theory did not hold up. It would take another study and years more listening before the true source became clear. For years, the source stayed unconfirmed. Then, in a study published in September 2024 in the journal Frontiers in Marine Science, NOAA oceanographer Ann Allen and her colleagues used machine learning to convert years of acoustic recordings into spectrogram images, sorting through more than 200,000 hours of hydrophone data. During a survey off the Mariana Islands, researchers visually confirmed 10 separate groups of Bride's whales. 9 of those sightings lined up directly with the same eerie sound. A single overlap might have been coincidence. A second could still be explained away. By the 9th, Allen said, there was only one explanation left. It's definitely a Bride's whale. A decade of uncertainty, solved by AI sorting through years of patient, unglamorous data collection, layered on top of real fieldwork. It is a genuinely satisfying resolution. It is also the closest this list comes to a happy ending, because the final entry has no resolution at all. Number 1. The 60-year debate. On January 23, 1960, Jacques Piccard and Don Walsh piloted the bathyscaphe Trieste to the bottom of Challenger Deep, becoming the first humans in history to reach the deepest known point on Earth. After a 5-hour descent stirred the seafloor into a cloud of sediment, Piccard later wrote in National Geographic that he watched a flatfish, resembling a sole, roughly a foot long, swim slowly away into the dark. Almost immediately, marine biologists pushed back. At that depth, the pressure is so extreme that most researchers believed a true bony fish could not physically survive there, a theory later reinforced by exactly how Hadal snailfish manage the same environment, using specialized biochemistry most fish simply do not have. In a 2012 paper published in the Biological Bulletin, titled On the Validity of the Trieste Flatfish, Dispelling the Myth, researchers Alan Jameson and Paul Yancey argued the sighting was most likely a misidentified sea cucumber, disturbed by the vessel's own landing. Even Walsh, decades later, admitted uncertainty. Visibility at the moment of the sighting was so poor, he later said, it was like looking in a bowl of milk, and neither he nor Piccard were trained biologists. The animal, he conceded, could have been something else entirely. No one returned to the bottom of the Mariana Trench for more than 50 years after that first dive. Walsh himself later reflected that he and Piccard had assumed at the time that another expedition would follow within a couple of years. Instead, the U.S. Navy limited the Trieste to shallower operations by the end of the 1960s, and it would take until Cameron's solo descent in 2012 for anyone to see the bottom of Challenger Deep again. No camera caught the flatfish. No specimen was ever recovered. 65 years later, it remains one of the most cited, most debated, and least resolved encounters in the entire history of ocean exploration, sitting at the top of a list built almost entirely on things that were captured on film. 10 of these 11 encounters were filmed, documented, and eventually explained by real scientists working with real institutions. That is not a disappointment. It means the trench keeps handing back things stranger than fiction, and researchers keep finding a way to understand them. But the very first recorded encounter with the bottom of the world may be the one thing down there that no camera has ever managed to confirm. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more ancient mysteries and impossible discoveries.